After so many years of doing things the wrong way, it took for the Most High to break me down to get me to understand that the way I was doing things wasn't the right way. That he only wants his worship and his praise one way, his way. Any other sacrifice won't be accepted. I'ma love you with my heart. I gotta love you with my soul. With all of my mind. 'Cause it's my sacrifice to you. Obedience is better than sacrifice. My obedience is my sacrifice. I'm striving to get it right. So many sleepless nights, my conscience wouldn't let me live a lie. Your Holy Spirit taught me truth and transformed my entire life. Won't indulge if it's questionable. Want my offering to be accepted. Don't wanna blaspheme your name. My actions should be reflection of you. Told me to be separate, so I don't care what the world. I use my talents to praise your name. Won't bury them like a squirrel do. I'ma love you with my heart. Greatest commandment, 'cause it encompasses all your commandments. Provision is balanced, your judgment just, dominions established. Protect me with your laws, help me see my flaws, distinguish right from wrong. I was broken to pieces, your guidance, that's what made me whole. I'm trying to save a soul, make your goodness known. Share my testimony, through grace you kept me strong. Your mercy alone kept me holding on. Even if it was by a stream, you fed my life and I know it, and that's the reason I sing. Love you in my heart.
And it shall come to pass, that if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of Yahuwah thy Elohim, to observe, to do all his commandments and his statutes, which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. Cursed shalt thou be in the city, and cursed shalt thou be in the field. Cursed shall be thy basket and thy store. Cursed shall be the fruit of thy body, and the fruit of thy land, the increase of thy kind, and the flocks of thy sheep. Cursed shalt thou be when thou comest in, and cursed shalt thou be when thou goest out.
My people dying, it's a lot of crying. It's like all love is gone, everything going wrong. Brother against brother, no fathers in the home. Betrayed by so-called friends, and you feel so alone. Where do we go from here? It's like the same old thing. Traveled this road before, don't wanna see pain no more. It's a cold world, very few obey our commands, for we know the earth is given into wicked hands. If my people called by my name will humble themselves and seek my face and pray, it will be okay. hold you with my right hand. Yeah.
First off, all praises to my life source. I heard this beat, it made me wanna tell my life story. Cause we all under these curses, so you relate to it. But I decided to speak strictly about our current goings, because iniquity abounds, love wax cold. It used to be even in wickedness you had a goal, but love of money and love of self became the main goal. Behave ourselves as if we ain't sheep of the same fold. We need each other more than ever now, if you ain't know. It's about to get worse than it's ever been, this world cold. To enter the kingdom we gotta endure and go through much tribulation. But before we get to that point, we gotta master the basics. Keeping the laws ain't an option, and you can't pick the ones you wanna. It's sad that that's the top of we folks who claim they Yasharala. We can't help the lost sheep while we got visible problems. Until you fully submit, you ain't giving glory and honor.
Father, give me strength to fight the battles that I have inside. In your secret place I cry, according to my flesh I die. Your Holy Spirit gives me life, I'll be a living sacrifice. Purify me with your fire, tired of going through generational curses. Teach me your commandments so that I can be perfect. Forgive me my transgressions and deliver me from evil. Abba, please take away the curses of your people. If my people called by my name will humble themselves and seek my face and pray, it will be okay. Turn from all your wicked ways, obey the word and have faith. I will heal the land, uphold you with my right hand. Yeah.
For I wish that I myself were accursed from Christ for my brethren, my kinsmen according to the flesh, who are Israelites, to whom pertaineth the adoption and the glory and the covenants and the giving of the law and the services of God and the promises. It's time to turn back to Yah so he can turn back to us and restore these curses back to blessings.
Shalom, family. One of the most important things is for us to be holy. Now, what does that mean? That means we have to separate ourselves from the world and build unity and community. Grab yourself a shirt that expresses that message, and let's not just talk about it, let's live it.
Ain't no free will, it's all predestinated. From every death to every child brought forth through copulation. For the spouse that you choose to your current occupation, you either receive mercy or Yahweh's indignation. I can recollect on times that I could have been dead, caught lacking, no strap, I had a knife instead. Played it cool, he wanted to kill me for how I used to move. Had to match his energy, portray that I was strapped too. But inside I'm praying to God, hoping he don't shoot. Still I'm whooping, telling him I know what he won't do. It ain't for everybody. It ain't for everybody. Salvation ain't for everybody. It ain't for everybody. It ain't for everybody. It ain't for everybody. Salvation ain't for everybody. It ain't for everybody. Yeah, many you call, but few get chosen. Matthew 22 and 14. My righteousness gonna exceed that of the Pharisees. Do what they. Shalom, shalom, family. Shalom.
Peace, gang. Peace, family.
So first, we want to start off as we always do by giving all praise, honor, glory to the Most High, whose name is Yahweh, and we do so by Shem Hamashiach Yahweh Shai, my brother Hurt. And tonight's lesson is Law and Order, the Balance of the People, Deuteronomy Chapter 5. And tonight's lesson will be brought forth by Brother Aaron. So all praise, honor, glory to the Most High, and peace to everyone that's in the chat that has commented, and also to those of you that may have not commented yet. Peace and blessings also to you. And as the pinned comment says, thank you for helping us grow the kingdom of the Most High by liking, commenting, and sharing the video. Please subscribe and turn on the notifications so you don't miss out on future lessons. All praise to the Most High. Aki, got anything you want to say before we get it going?
No, nothing to add, King.
All praise. So without further ado, if you want to go ahead and get into it, you can.
God, all praises to the Most High. All praises to the Most High. Peace and blessings, family. I hope everybody is well. Just like always, make sure to like the video, make sure to share, and to do all of those things. As a brother Hurt mentioned, it's another edition of Law and Order. This edition is Deuteronomy Chapter 5. And again, this is just a continuation from Deuteronomy 4. And within this chapter of Deuteronomy 5, you're going to see that Moses is rehearsing the 10 Commandments directly. So this particular chapter is important because it lays out the core tenets of the covenant that Israel is expected to keep when they enter into the land. So as I mentioned before, I think in Deuteronomy 1, when we did that one, the book of Deuteronomy as a whole, it serves as, I think the quote, it said, a charter document. And so basically a charter document that outlines the legal specifications on how an entity or a people are supposed to govern themselves. So Deuteronomy 5 is a very important chapter because it's pretty much going to mirror a lot of what we see in the famous chapter, Exodus chapter 20. So before I go into it, you got any points, Ken?
I guess just a comment that right now, I don't know, for some reason Facebook is limiting my shares. So if y'all haven't shared, please make sure you do so, because they do this from time to time. They try to give us difficulty on putting the lesson out. So all praise to the Most High though for who's able to join the stream right now. All praises.
God. Absolutely. Absolutely. All praises. So we're gonna kick it off with a Deuteronomy chapter 5. And if you're able to, my good brother, can you just read for me verse? Is it showing up on the screen?
Deuteronomy 5.
Copy. Okay. So we'll just read verses 1 through 2.
And it reads, and Moses summoned all Israel and said to them, hear, O Israel, the statutes and the ordinances which I speak in your hearing this day, and you shall learn them and be careful to do them. The Lord our God made a covenant with us in Horeb.
Right. So as you read here in the first two verses of Deuteronomy 5, you see that Moses, he calls all of Israel and tells them to hear the statutes and ordinances and to learn them and to do them. So again, we see the same formula of hear what God said to do and then be careful to do it. And then in verse 2, you see that Moses, he says the Most High made a covenant with us in Horeb. And when you go into the word for Horeb, it means essentially it means a desert. So Horeb is a generic way to refer to Mount Sinai. And you'll see this as you read within the biblical narrative, like in places like Malachi, but also when you look at the entry in Strong's lexicon or any type of lexical analysis that you look at, it'll give you that same basically that same conclusion. And we could go into it right now. When you look at Deuteronomy chapter 5 and verse 2, right here, what you'll see is this latter clause that says Berith Bekadev, or Bekodev. And this is in covenant, in desert, or in Horeb. So the covenant in mind is in reference to the one that was made in the desert at Sinai. So let's just continue on. Since we got that clarity, we can continue on to verses 3 through 5, unless you got any points, Brother Hurt.
Just shalom to everyone, Brother YP, Brother Q, Sister Kanaya, and Brother Drayson. Shalom, family. And Sister Wendy also. Salaki, shalom.
Khan, so you can just read verses 3 through 5.
Khan. Not with our fathers did the Lord make this covenant, but with us, who are all of us here alive this day. The Lord spoke with you face to face at the mountain out of the midst of the fire, while I stood between the Lord and you at that time to declare to you the word of the Lord. For you were afraid because of the fire, and you did not go up into the mountain, he said.
Con. So as you read within the particular verses, specifically in verse 3, Moses, he continues on and says, the Most High did not make this covenant with our fathers, but with us, who are all of us here alive this day. So Moses is basically emphasizing that this covenant is binding on the current generation. And this isn't one that was made with the patriarchs or the ancestors that came before them or became before that generation that Moses is speaking to, but it's specifically with them that are still there and alive that day. And then as you look at verses 4 through 5, he reminds them that the Most High spoke with them face to face out of the fire. But Moses stood between the Most High and the people because they were afraid. So, in simplicity, I'll say Moses, he functioned as a go-between or a mediator of the covenant, and he delivered what the Most High spoke in that particular narrative. And you'll see that, Moses, he's basically rehearsing the events of what happened in Exodus 20, and right here in that particular pericope, you'll see the 10 commandments. They were spread forth from the Most High, as you read in Exodus 20. Matter of fact, we're gonna get the account, but after that point, the rest of the law came from Moses to go to the people, because in that particular account, the people became fearful. And so, just to actually show that, let's jump to the book of Exodus. We're gonna get Exodus 20. You can read for me, my good brother, chapter 20, verses 18 through 19.
God. Now when all the people perceived the thunderings and the lightnings and the sound of the trumpet and the mountain smoking, the people were afraid and trembled, and they stood afar off and said to Moses, you speak to us and we will hear, but let not God speak to us lest we die.
God. So this particular account shows that after the Most High has spoken to the people, they were fearful. When you look up a little bit earlier, you'll literally see the commandments. You should not bear false witness against your neighbor, not to covet. And then, right after that, we see, that they're afraid for the response. And so at that point, Moses is then asked by the people to speak to them and not the Most High, lest they die. So this basically gives you the background of what's being spoken about in the book of Deuteronomy chapter 5 within the first few verses. Now, before I continue on, you got any points, King? Con. All right, so we're going to go back to Deuteronomy chapter 5, and we're going to read verses 6 through 10. And real quick, if anybody has any questions or anything that they need me to slow down on or anything like that, just place it in the chat and I'll make sure to address it. So I just want to make sure I put that disclaimer out there before I forget. But yeah, you can read verses 6 through 10.
God. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments.
Right. So as we read through this particular account, it basically recounts when the Most High gave us the command or the commandments against having other gods before him. And, of course, graven images, which when you go into the language is in reference to an idol carved for the purpose of worship. So in so many words, Israel was commanded to not serve or bow down to any other deity or create images for idolatry. And in regards to, just to give some clarity to this, in regard to having gods before him or in front of his face in the Hebrew, the word there is panim, which deals with the front of the face or the front of the mouth. So we basically weren't to worship other gods in front of God or within his presence. And again, if you read throughout the biblical narrative, God's presence, it goes any and with, anywhere which way. So you can't escape God's presence. So the point is to not worship other deities if you're an Israelite. That's the point that's being conveyed. And then when you look at verses 9 through 10, you see that the Most High, he describes himself as a jealous God, visiting iniquity of them who habitually remain workers of such, iniquity, sin, so on and so forth. But he shows mercy and love to them who love the Most High and keep his commandments. So we see both judgment for doing against what God has commanded, and then mercy for the sincere. So we see that already early on based upon, because this is based upon Exodus. So this was already an early, an early theme, if you will, of, the law of the Most High God. If you did what was right in the Most High sight, if you were sincere, you would receive mercy, love from the Most High. But if you did against the commandments of the Most High God, then the Lord was going to judge you from generation to generation. All right, but you got any points before I move on, King?
Beautiful lesson so far.
All praises to the Most High. So just real quick, and we're probably going to be parked here for a little bit. Read verse 11.
You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. God.
Yeah, and hey, and that's funny because hey, if y'all can put a one in the chat if you ever heard anybody say if you say like oh my God or OMG or anything like that, that you're taking the Lord's name in vain, and you're chastised for doing so. Put a one in the chat if you've ever heard that. Because personally I'm gonna put a one in the chat because I've heard that.
I've
That
never heard it.
that was the break, that was the breakdown, coming up. That was definitely the breakdown.
Right.
I'm gonna let y'all know if y'all haven't learned already. That's not what that's talking about. That's not what the text is going into. So in the verse it says, "You shall not take up the name of the Most High your God in vain, for the Most High will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain." So right there, when you go into the Hebrew language, it actually it says to take up or to bear the name of the Most High in vain. And when you go into the Hebrew text, it actually matter of fact, I'm gonna pull it up so y'all can see it. So I'm not just so it doesn't appear as if I'm just speaking, right? Is this showing the Hebrew text on the screen?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
There we go.
Okay. Appreciate it. So right here, when you look at this is the text for Deuteronomy chapter 5 and verse number 11. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna look at the text that's there. So this is the relevant clause. You see lo tisma or tisa eighth shim. So right there, that's no, take up, name, or reputation, more appropriately. So when you look up this word for name, and I'll go into it very quickly, it's H8034, which is in reference to, I'm trying to pull it up, but it's going to be in reference to reputation, um, fame, glory, etc. So you see memorial, reputation, fame, glory, then the definition, It pretty much gives you the same thing. So want to make sure y'all understand that. So again, the Most High's name isn't God. So that would, you know, debunk or refute that understanding that saying, oh my God would be taking the Most High's name in vain, because the Most High's name is not God, first off. But when you go into what it means to take up the Most High's name or to bear it in vain, this is in reference to basically carrying his name in falsehood. Because when you go into the word for vain, this deals with falsehood or something that's not of a good purpose, or vanity, if you will. And so when you continue on within the text, it says ki lo yenike. And when you go into the root word for nike, this is referring to leaving something unpunished or, without pardon. So the text here is, basically not conveying something that's, just verbal, like, someone saying, oh my God, or whatever the case is. But this is, carrying a little bit more with your actions, if you will. So basically, this would deal with a false prophet, one what that quote unquote comes in the name of the Lord, and they're either prophesying false things, or better yet, they may appear as if they have some type of authorization from the Most High because they may deliver a sign or two, but they're then turning around and telling you to worship other deities, as you read in the book of Deuteronomy 13. This would refer to people, such as those, false prophets, people that attribute, you know, either falsehood or vanity to the Most High in the name of the Most High, and things of that sort. Also, it would apply to blasphemers as well, because when you deal with, one that blasphemes, this is somebody that's, uttering reproachful sayings toward the Most High and his reputation. Again, like, we have, examples of this, but it goes much deeper than someone saying, oh my God. So I want to make sure I make that clear, and I want to show y'all a biblical example. And matter of fact, we're going to go into it a little bit later on in Leviticus 24. But again, we have the Hebrew text right here. And when y'all get a chance, I want y'all to really, like, matter of fact, we're going to go into it. Let's go to H7723. This is a word for falsehood, which is inflected as lashav. It's a root word shav right here. When you go into this particular word, and I mentioned it before, it's emptiness, vanity, falsehood, or worthlessness. Definition, it gives you the same thing. Matter of fact, can you read the definition?
Khan, from the same as H7722, in the sense of desolating, evil, as destructive, literally, ruin, or morally, especially guile, figuratively, idolatry, as false, subjective, uselessness, as deceptive, objective, also adverbially, in vain, falsely, lie, lying, vain, vanity.
Right. All right. So as you can see, based on the definition and the usage, it carries the sense of emptiness, falsehood, and misrepresentation. So right here, when you look at the command in Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 11, when it tells you not to take up the Most High's name in vain, this command is prohibiting the bearing, of the Most High's name in falsehood or of an empty manner. And so this could apply to prophecy, as I mentioned, but it also can apply to speech, some type of oath, or your just overall conduct. And we can see biblical examples of this all throughout. And I'm gonna pull up a few. If you can, my good brother, just read for me. Let's go to first. Let's go to Samuel chapter 26. Excuse me, Psalm chapter 26, and read for me verses 4 through 5. And put it on the screen.
I do not sit with false men, nor do I consort with dissemblers. I hate the company of evildoers, and I will not sit with the wicked.
Right. So as you look in the book of Psalm chapter 26, verses 4 through 5, um, this is obviously in regard to conduct. Like conduct is in scope. And when you look at the particular word here that's rendered for false, or some translations say deceitful, it's the same word. It's the same word shav, which deals with vanity, falsehood, etc. Just to show y'all, I'll go into it briefly. Same word right here, shav, 77:23. So again, same word that's rendered as vain in Deuteronomy 5 and 11. And so this is showing that conduct is a part of vanity as well. It's not just someone saying, oh my God, or something as, simple as that, but it goes much deeper than, someone saying a certain thing, but but pairing it with, you know, um, acts of vanity, acts of falsehood, and misrepresentation toward the Most High. Let's get another one. And if you got anything at any point, you can jump in, King.
Not at this time.
Copy. Let's read Job chapter 11, verses 7 through 11.
Con. Can you find out the deep things of God? Can you find out the limit of the Almighty? It is higher than heaven. What can you do? Deeper than Sheol. What can you know? Its measure is longer than the earth and broader than the sea. If he passes through and imprisons and calls to judgment, who can hinder him? For he knows worthless men. When he sees iniquity, will he not consider it?
Right. So right here in context, this is Job's friend Zophar when you start at the beginning of the chapter, and he's speaking to Job, and he's basically spewing out wisdoms, that aren't necessarily applicable to Job if you read the narrative, but in general, these things are universally true, and that stands for specifically Job 11 and 11, where it says that the Most High knows or perceives worthless men. Again, when you go into that word for worthless, it's shav. And it then says, when he sees iniquity, he considers it, meaning he knows it or learns of it, quote unquote. So within the biblical text, we see examples of vanity being in reference to speech and actions. You got any points before I move on, King?
Well, I think this is just like reading this. It's a take or a stance we should have when we see iniquity. We consider it. We understand what it is when we are faced with it, and not look at it like, oh well, I mean, it's something that I probably could do and it'll be okay. No, it's iniquity, and you got to consider what the end of it is. So yeah, all praises.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get a precept. Leviticus 19, verse number 12.
God. And you shall not swear by my name falsely, and so profane the name of your God. I am the Lord.
Right. So right in Leviticus 19 and 12, we're told not to swear by his name falsely. And when you examine the language, it refers to promising or declaring emphatically. And you can when you look at the lexical data, it basically it says to I think it's like I can't remember exactly how they say it, but it refers to solemnly or emphatically pronouncing something. So the example would be, how you might have certain people who would say, as the Lord lives, and then they will follow up with a particular statement, but that statement is in falsehood. That's a direct example of rendering the Most High's name in vain. And another correlation, and that would be, another correlation to, what's being communicated within the book of Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 11, as far as taking up the Most High's name in vain. You got any points on that out?
Kind of like when people
attribute, their success to the Most High and saying that, that He did it. I mean, in a sense, he did, or he allowed the trajectory of the path to go a certain way. But people will look at certain blessings they receive when doing wickedness and say, God did that. That's blasphemy in itself. And the Most High, He's not dealing with that, and it's definitely frowned upon because it's taking the Lord's name in vain and saying that you're attributing something to Him when you're not even pleasing to Him. But yeah, that's it.
No, that's a great point. And and just in simple terms, this command overall, it prohibits a false witness, a false prophet, a blasphemer, or anyone doing or speaking things that the Most High did not say or sanction, or it could, like I mentioned, it can include simply just disrespecting the reputation of the Most High, as I mentioned. And I made mention of Leviticus 24 a little bit earlier. I want to go into it because you actually see an example of somebody blaspheming the Most High's name, which again would lead to it being disrespected and misrepresented and all of those things. But we see a judgment rendered for someone doing that, because as we read in Deuteronomy 5:11, it said that that person wouldn't go unpunished or pardoned. So something is going to happen to you for causing the Most High's name to be misrepresented, or for it to be disrespected. Let's go to the book of Leviticus chapter 24, and you can read verses 10 through 11.
Khan. Now an Israelite woman's son, whose father was an Egyptian, went out among the people of Israel, and the Israelite woman's son and a man of Israel quarreled in the camp. And the Israelite woman's son blasphemed the name and cursed, and they brought him to Moses. His mother's name was Shilamith, the daughter of Debri of the tribe of Dan.
Right. So we see a man who has an Egyptian father and an Israelite mother fighting with a brother who's identified as an Israelite. And the man is said to have blasphemed the name of God, as you read within the narrative. Um, very, very, very interesting situation that's transpired. But again, real quick, can you read verse number 11 one more time?
Khan. And the Israelite woman's son blasphemed the name and cursed, and they brought him to Moses. His mother's name was Shelamith, the daughter of Debri of the tribe of Dan.
Right. And so real quick, I want to go into this word or this phrase, the name, because it's something it's very interesting that I want to show y'all. So when you look at the Hebrew text here, you're gonna see Eighth Hashem, same word from before, as we've seen in Deuteronomy 5:11, but it has the Ha prefix, so this would be the definite article, so it'd be the name. And that's why I think many translations they put it in, I think they capitalize it. Yep, it capitalizes the word name, which is a very interesting point. But when you go into what's meant by the phrase Hashem right here, this actually denotes the Most High, or acts as a substitute for the actual utterance of the Most High's proper name. Like within scholastic information, it'll be referred to as a circumlocution, which is basically a way to use, more words than necessary, for the sake of ambiguity, for one reason or another. In this particular case, what's understood is that the Jews later wanted to implement this in the text as far as Hashem is concerned. They wanted to implement this into the text so that they could guard people from blaspheming and taking the Most High's name in vain. But that's an aside. Continuing on, it said that the man cursed the Most High's name. And when you go into the word for cursed, it's the Hebrew word kalal. And when you dive deep into this, it's in the PL stem, which is intensive, which means that, he said something that was highly disrespectful toward the Most High. And when you look at the lexical data here, it basically goes into declaring, declaring something as evil. So this man, he didn't have any regard for our God, and that's very clear as you just read within the first two verses. So when you look at that verse, it said that, they brought him to Moses, or they grabbed him up and brought him to Moses. So next we're going to see, as within the following verses, what then happens to this person for doing this particular action. And that action is disrespecting the Most High's name, rendering it, worthless, placing falsehood on it, whatever the case is. But he disrespected the Most High's reputation. Let's see what happens to him. Just read verse 12.
And they put him in custody till the will of the Lord should be declared to them.
Right. So it said they put him in custody, or when you look in certain translations or look into the language, this deals with the place of confinement. And then it said they did this until the mind or the will of the Most High God was made clear to them. Now let's see what the Most High decided. Read 13 through 16.
I'm back. And the Lord said to Moses, bring out of the camp him who cursed, and let all who heard him lay their hands upon his head, and let all the congregation stone him. And say to the people of Israel, whoever curses his God shall bear his sin. He who blasphemes the name of the Lord shall be put to death. All the congregation shall stone him, the sojourner as well as the native. When he blasphemes the name, shall be put to death.
So the Most High's will was that this man, along with anyone else moving forward that blasphemed the name of the Most High, was to be put to death via stoning by the whole congregation. So misusing the Most High's name, whether it be his reputation, or even, like, you can't really separate his proper name from his reputation in many senses, but, misusing his name in any way is a serious offense. And as we see through the narrative, the Most High doesn't take it lightly. As we see it in Leviticus 24, in this particular example, the misusage here caused this person to be put to death. And as you read within the original commandment in Deuteronomy Chapter 5 and also Exodus Chapter 20, the Most High is not going to render that person guiltless. So you're going to have guilt on you, and you're not going to receive pardon, just based on what the text says and based on these examples. So that's pretty much that for that particular section. You got any points, King?
I think, well, just one point. We kind of touched on this a little bit in the Leviticus 5 lesson, because we covered how just speaking anything that's not true would basically be considered a sin. And so we see something that's a little more expressive with the Most High. You mentioning the Most High and attributing something to him, blaspheming his name. This is also a sin, in itself. So yeah, just the seriousness of being honest and being obedient to what the Most High has to say to us.
Absolutely. All praise to the Most High. Make sure y'all drop it too if there's anything that was not made clear or that was confusing at all, because I definitely want everybody to to understand what's being laid down. But all praises to the Most High. Beautiful add-on, King. We're going to continue on with Deuteronomy chapter 5. Let's get back. And you can read verses 12 through 15.
Observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy, as the Lord your God commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath to the Lord your God. In it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, or your manservant, or your maidservant, or your ox, or your ass, or any of your cattle, or the sojourner who is within your gates, that your manservant and your maidservant may rest as well as you. You shall remember that you were a servant in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out thence with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day.
Right, right. So in these particular verses, we get the commandments regarding um, keeping the Sabbath holy, and what's expected is listed. So we see that it says the seventh day is to be set apart, and labor is basically to cease. And within the land, then within our territory, were to cease from work, which is more than likely based upon historical data and context. It would have included our businesses, respectively, our industry work, we would understand our daily occupations, our jobs, as well as indulgence and, people working for us. And you see like a rebuke or a back and forth that happens. I think it's in Isaiah 58, where it speaks about not doing your own pleasure on the Sabbath day. When you read the context of that, it shows how a lot of people tried to find pleasure in exacted labor of their people, that worked for them, while the people should have been ceasing from work. So again, you see that particular context just even within the Tanakh. And it actually it goes a lot deeper, when you read the rest of the Tanakh, when you read throughout the rest of the Torah, and honestly, this is actually a lesson in and of itself. I think actually we touched on this was allowed on the Sabbath. I think a little while back, or a good while back, wasn't a little while, but um, again, those things were strictly outlawed. And also, when you look at Jewish tradition as well, they had outlined 39 different types of work, which were to be ceased from. And this would have included stuff like plowing, sowing, reaping, building, demolishing, etc. And when you look at how the Jews, they did it, they actually put a little bit, they went a little bit further, some of the Jews, because like you even see within the New Testament, people are saying, well, how could you pick up that mat of straw, or the bed, because people, I don't know if people think that, this man that was unable to walk, he was just walking around with like a king size mattress. That's not that, because people were saying, oh man, it's a sin to pick up your mattress on the Sabbath. I'm like, well, do you think he was walking around with a king size mattress? Of course not. But it would have been, within the language dealing with a mat of straw, so it wouldn't have been heavy at all, like no more than like 5 pounds at the most. But again, diving into the law, diving into what it speaks about in regard to you know pre-exilic lifestyle, as far as what we ceased from on the Sabbath day, we see it was from our occupations respectively, and also our indulgence within business. And we would understand this at at a point we begin to understand this as indulging in commerce, and you see that with like Nehemiah and people like that. And so this is how you begin to see people are interpreting the Torah. So again, those are good examples and good things to look into. And this is overall like a very deep topic to dive into as well. There's many arguments occur about this particular topic. Well, can you do this on a Sabbath, or can you not do this on a Sabbath? But we know for sure that there's a ceasing in work, which would include occupation, industry, and things of the sort. So wanted to make that point. But you got anything you want to add before I move on?
I got a small point. I
Con.
just dealing with the Sabbath and like having your own business. So having your own business, and let's just say that it's someone that's not an Israelite, a heathen works for you. And some people would think it's okay, like, to let them work because the law wasn't given to them; it was given to Israel, right? But one thing they have to think about is the way that the laws were structured when we were living in our land. If there was a sojourner that was of the other nations and they were living in or passing through Israel, and they had to make a stop there, right? They couldn't be caught working on the Sabbath either. They would be put to death. So if you do have a business and you got a heathen working for you, no, it's not okay. It's not okay to allow the heathen to work for you on the Sabbath because they ain't Israel and the law wasn't given to them. And then you also have to look at it like this: they're making money for you and your business, so you still breaking the law by default because you're bringing in finances on the day of the Sabbath. You're actually accumulating finances. But yeah,
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I think that was good to harp on because a lot of people, because I think, and I do understand it, because we are as Israelites very like ethnocentric when it comes to certain standards and things like that. We'll say, well, I'll just get a heathen to go and sin, and I'll tell him to go and do X, Y, and Z, and it's not that big of a deal anyway because the law wasn't given to him, and the Most High God is not dealing with him in X, Y, and Z. But also, as you mentioned, this is something that's connected to you, and so if you have a heathen working for you and he's in the midst of you, then there's no reason for you to believe that. Well, and think about it: if we're in the land, right? If we're in the land and we're observing the Sabbath, and the heathen is just going ahead and doing whatever he pleases, do you think that nothing is going to happen to him while he's in the midst of Israelites? You think he's just all right to do whatever he pleases? He has to, just like for us, if we ever had to go and abide amongst other heathens and live within their culture, we can't do. There are certain things that we're not going to be able to do to offend them without consequence.
right. You got to follow their laws, just like we got
Right.
to follow laws in America.
Right. Like I mean, and I mean, look, I mean, somebody might say, "Oh, well, you could do anything you please." That's why I said with consequence, because like it's gonna be a consequence if you disregard or desecrate what they have, the order that they have in place. So it's the same with the Israelites and the law that was put in place to keep us in order. The other people, they can't just come in and disregard it. So I'm glad that you made that point. Um, and then when you continue on in verse number 15, it makes mention that we are to remember that the Most High saved us out of Egypt. And for the sake of the testimony, we have to obey the commandment of keeping the Sabbath day. And also, this would include the other commandments as well. But this is a constant reminder, the testimony that the Most High brought us out of Egypt. And for that cause, we have to obey his commandments. You got any points before I move on, King? All praises. Let's read verse 16.
Honor your father and your mother as the Lord your God commanded you, that your days may be prolonged and that it may go well with you in the land which the Lord your God gives you.
Right. So, verse 16, it says to honor thy father or to honor your mother and your father, or your father and your mother. And by obeying this command, we prolonged our days in the land that God promised us. And this was the case if we kept the commandments in general. Because in the last chapter breakdown we did with Deuteronomy, it literally said if we kept the commandments, then it would go well for us and our days would be prolonged. As a matter of fact, I'll read the text so y'all can see it. If you can for me, good brother, just read Deuteronomy chapter 4, just verse 40.
Therefore you shall keep his statutes and his commandments, which I command you this day, that it may go well with you, and with your children after you, and that you may prolong your days in the land which the Lord your God gives you forever.
Right. So we could have enjoyed a prolonged life in the land if we obeyed. That's clean in the text. But as you read within the narrative, we went away from what the Most High wanted us to do. And one more point I want to touch on before I pass it to you, Hurt, is the piece in regard to honoring your parents. Because when you go into the language, this is in reference to regarding them as weighty. And even when you look at the verb stem, it's in the intensive or the resultive. So essentially, like when you look at the lexical data, it says to basically glorify them or cause them to be glorified. And this would be because of your actions, whether it be the reverence that you show them directly or the way you carry yourself in the midst of the people, especially those that know your parents, because what happens, what ends up happening is that when they see you carrying yourself with a certain dignity and honor, they exalt your parents. But when you dishonor your parents, whether directly to their faces or, in disgraceful behavior, in the midst of the people, the opposite happens, and the name of your parents depreciates and is, reduced. And certain examples that you can see with this would be like the sons of Eli, who were called worthless men. But again, one more point just to add is that this particular commandment prohibits cursing your parents and disrespecting them. That's something that it obviously would prohibit, but as well as that, you can't be a disgrace, to bring shame upon your parents. So that's again how you would honor your parents, but of course respecting them directly, and then also being listening to the things that they told you to do. I obviously, and I want to make sure I put this disclaimer out there. Not if your parents are like, if you have wicked parents and they're telling you, hey, transgress the laws of God, that's obviously not what you go ahead and do. You know, you would still show them a form of respect at least, but you don't just go against God for the sake of what your parents are telling you to do. If it's wicked or anything like that. There's obviously a real discretion that you can apply and use sense, but I want to make sure I make mention of that. So it's you know so I did give the disclaimer. But real quick, let's jump to Leviticus. Let's get a precept, Leviticus 20 and verse 9.
And I'm gonna ask a question while you heading
Con,
there.
con.
Y'all, I don't know if y'all familiar with, and you can put one in the chat if you are, with, I don't know if your parents or grandparents or just people in general in your community while you were growing up, they were like, respect your elders. God gonna shorten your days. Or they would say that about your parents. Respect your parents, and God gonna shorten your days. This is where they get that from. They get it from the scripture. And it's so ironic that it's so many things that are in Torah that are not mentioned, that people don't say, hey, the Most High, God, He's gonna prolong your days if you do this, so He's gonna shorten your days if you do this. They don't attribute that to other things, but they attribute that to respecting your elders. So, God, all praises. So I see a few brothers that say, yeah, one, that y'all heard the same thing. So it's just kind of ironic, It just kind of, I thought about that while I was reading that scripture. But yeah, all praises.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's now that's actually a great point because the Torah, 100%, the Torah says that. But our days would be prolonged for keeping the commandments like holistically. So it's like I wish that would have been applied to like or it's it would be widely understood and applied to like just obeying God's commandments in general. But people at least understand. They somewhat understand that concept. Which is which is a good thing. But
Stop eating that pork. God gonna shorten your days.
is that exactly? It's like, hey, you start implementing that all over.
Right.
Some things gonna turn around, man.
God.
All right, but Just so you can read Leviticus 20 and verse 9.
Con. For everyone who curses his father or his mother shall be put to death. He has cursed his father or his mother. His blood is upon him.
Right. So dishonoring or cursing your parents was an offense punishable by death. We can see that clean in the Torah. And I'm gonna try not to go too deep into the book of Leviticus because I know the brother Hurdy's going into it. So I'm gonna show another precept, Deuteronomy 21, verse 18. You can read 18 through 21.
Con. If a man has a stubborn and rebellious son who will not obey the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and though they chastise him, will not give heed to them, then his father and his mother shall take hold of him and bring him out to the elders of his city at the gate of the place where he lives. And they shall say to the elders of his city, this, our son, is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard. Then all the men of the city shall stone him to death with stones. So you shall purge the evil from your midst, and all Israel shall hear and fear. If you talking, I'll you on mute. Oh no, I see what you got going on. You can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. All praise to the Most High. Yeah, I don't know what happened just now. It just the thing just crashed for some reason, but all praise to the Most High. So right there within the text, we see the same thing, but it adds a dynamic already existing. It says if there's a stubborn and rebellious child who won't obey his parents, and they even chastise him, and then of course with chastisement it deals with like bodily chastisement when you look into lexical data. But at this point they've tried to chastise or discipline their child, but he still won't listen. Then they are to take him to the gate of the respective city, where they live at, and the elders, or to the elders, and tell them about the particular matter, and they would state that he's a drunkard and a glutton. And when you go into that word for drunkard, it idiomatically deals with one who lacks restraint or discipline, and a glutton, right there, it means worthless. And again, you should think about the apostasy of the sons of Eli, because again, I think I mentioned it earlier, they were called worthless when you read, I think in 1 Samuel 2. So, back to Deuteronomy 21, what follows is these children, they would be stoned by all the men of that respective city, so that the evil can be purged and that all of Israel may fear. So the takeaway holistically is that dishonoring your parents is an evil thing to do, and it has to be removed from amongst the people of Israel. And so even to the point of stoning the people that do it, as you see, as with the children. But I wanted to make that point because again, it wasn't just like you see how and I don't know why people view it like this, but they'll see certain children just misbehaving, and they'll kind of like think it's cute, or they'll kind of like downplay it. But
Oh, he's just a child. He gonna
right,
go through some stuff. Let him child. Let him be a child.
right. But an undisciplined child was something very shameful, and we see what happened to an undisciplined child that will not receive correction. And an interesting point that I heard recently when I was out teaching with certain brothers is just even on a more figurative level, if we compare ourselves, uh, as children of the Most High, um, we understand what happens when we're undisciplined and we don't, fall in line with what the Most High, is commanding us. What happens, with us not being disciplined is us walking in the flesh and us transgressing the laws of God, and that ultimately leads to our destruction. So we see the Torah concept, even there, just within our lives as adults. So just wanted to highlight that point. But you got any points before we move on, King?
Man, this is the real definition of I brought you in this world, I take you out.
Right.
And I know everybody's familiar with that saying, and also the saying of it takes a village. Right here, we see the village getting involved, but this time, as it takes a village, they getting rid of this child. It shows how serious the culture was and how serious the Most High was about the commandments, how serious our people were about keeping the commandments also. Because in order for parents to get to this point where they have to go to the elders of the city, this means that they're fervent in their faith and that they truly believe we're supposed to live by the Torah, live by the words of the Most High. And when you're raising up a child in that way, you got to understand that there's something more at work than just a child just being a child and just rebelling. They're rebelling against the Most High. Something has to be done, because understanding what the law tells us, like we've already went over, when you don't do these things, your days will be shortened. So even if these children aren't taken to the elders, the day's still gonna be shortened in some kind of way, shape, or form, because that's just how the Most High works, and that's how his laws are formulated to work. This is the way he structured things. When you look at verse 20, it says, "And they shall say to the elders of his city, this our son is stubborn and rebellious." So we understand this child, he's been instructed. This is why he's being called stubborn. He just don't want to do right. And he's rebellious. So he's going, forsaking everything that he's been taught by his parents. He will not obey our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard. Those two words, being a glutton and being a drunkard, it's just showing us that he's appealing to the lust of the flesh. This don't necessarily mean that he likes to sit around and eat all day and he likes to sit around and get drunk. But he could be drunk off of whatever wine it is that could be doctrine that goes contrary to what scripture tells him to do. And also the same thing with gluttony. You could be a glutton in whatever you may take in your spare time. It could be something that if you do it in minimal amounts, it's not a sin. But then you allow it to be overbearing in your life, and now it becomes a sin because you being enamored with, and you're putting it over the Most High. But yeah, all praise to the Most High. Beautiful lesson so far.
All praises. Excellent, excellent add-on. Absolutely. Yeah, that's great point, highlighting him being a glutton and a drunkard, because if we take into account, say this is a younger child, and not that it's impossible, but say you have an 8 or 9-year-old, it's not very likely that he's gonna have like a whole pint of yayan, and that's he just always taking that to the head, and he just always getting drunk, just on a literal sense. That's not I don't think that that's the necessary understanding. But when I honestly do some research and look at how the word drunkard is even utilized through the text, it deals with one that's just undisciplined, and they can't restrain the things of the flesh, but they mind those things, and they go after those things, and which are transgressions of God's law. So they can't get enough of going against God's law, can't get enough of going against their parents, whatever the case is. And so their parent, they're at a crossing point. Now they've tried a lot of things. They tried bodily chastisement. And if you understand what bodily chastisement is, then that's the belt, right? That'd be the belt or whatever they would have used to give the lashes, so to speak. But that's not working. So next we gotta get you up out of here. And so just to the brother's point, it speaks about or it speaks to the level of seriousness that um honoring your parents holds. It speaks to like how important it is to do such a thing, and you dishonoring them leads to your death. So excellent points overall. All praises to the Most High. Let's jump back to Deuteronomy chapter 5, and you can read 17 through 21.
Con, you shall not kill, neither shall you commit adultery, neither shall you steal, neither shall you bear false witness against your neighbor, neither shall you covet your neighbor's wife, and you shall not desire your neighbor's house, his field, or his manservant, or his maidservant, his ox, or his ass, or anything that is your neighbor's.
All right. Right. So these commands directly deal with murder, which is premeditated unaliving, adultery, which is when a man and a married woman have intercourse. You can read that in Leviticus 20 and 10. And also, when you look at the definition in the Hebrew, it gives you that understanding as well. It also deals with stealing, bearing false witness, and coveting that which does belong to you. And when you look at what coveting is, it's just desiring it or wanting it. So these particular things, they appear to be very simple, but these are some of the biggest issues we dealt with back then. And even to this day, this very day, we still deal with these things and have issues as far as, not stealing or not, murdering, committing adultery. That's very rampant. Even in the days of the Messiah, he said he dealt with an adulterous generation. So all of those things, and even the Messiah's death, you've seen false witness being bore. He had to speak about coveting in a very well way. He had to like make sure that people weren't trying to find loopholes to break this. So he had to bring out certain teachings because people, they just couldn't accept what the text literally said, to not cover what belonged to your neighbor. Like that's literally in the text. Like I don't get why. Well, I think I get why, but people, they'll say, oh, well, the Messiah, he had to come with this new law because the law of Moses, it wasn't good enough. But it's like some of the points that the Messiah brings out in regard to, looking upon another man's wife, that's literally right here. Don't covet your neighbor's wife. That's right here in the text. And even um, because I think the Messiah makes another point about uh if you hate your brother and you've murdered him in your heart, so to speak. The text has went out of its way clearly to tell you not to hate your brother. Like it's when I like that's in the text a few times as far as the law is concerned. But up until the Messiah's day, we had issues with that. Before we had issues with that, afterwards, and even up until today. These very simple commandments, quote unquote, are some of the core ones that we have issues with. And these are the tenets or the core tenets of the covenant that God made with us at Sinai. But we failed in a lot of these aspects, and this is why when we're restored and when we're fully placed back into our land, we're not going to be going against these things, and society is going to be a much better place. Because when you're just these few commandments that are mentioned, these things being constantly being broken, it destroys a people. Just these few things, this could destroy a people. But these things being adhered to can make a people great. Us upholding these things, us holding one another accountable when these things occur, it makes a people great. But yeah, I just wanted to make that point. Before I move on, you got any points, King?
La
All praises. Let's go to 22 through 24.
God. These words the Lord spoke to all your assembly at the mountain out of the midst of the fire, the cloud, and the thick darkness, with a loud voice, and he added no more. And he wrote them upon 2 tables of stone and gave them to me. And when you heard the voice out of the midst of the darkness, while the mountain was burning with fire, you came near to me, all the heads of your tribes and your elders. And you said, Behold, the Lord our God has shown us his glory and greatness, and we have heard his voice out of the midst of the fire. We have this day seen God speak with man, and man still live.
Right. So after the Most High spoke these commandments out of the fire, the people were marveling, and they were also afraid, because they saw God speak to man and man lived. And this basically appeals to what went into what we went into earlier as far as the people being afraid in the book of Exodus 20. And so they needed Moses to intercede and deal with the Most High for them, so that they can receive God's commandments, but not have to deal with God directly, because of their fear. But this is just the same account being rehearsed in Deuteronomy 5, and what Moses spoke to a little bit earlier in the chapter, he's bringing it back up at this point. You got any points, King, before we move on?
La
God, you can read 25 through 27.
God. Now therefore, why should we die? For this great fire will Salaki, I'm reading KJV down here. I'm looking up at the screen. Now, therefore, why should we die? For this great fire will consume us. If we hear the voice of the Lord our God anymore, we shall die. For who is there of all flesh that has heard the voice of the living God speaking out of the midst of fire, as we have, and has still lived? Go near and hear all the Lord our God will say, and speak to us all that the Lord our God will speak to you, and we will hear and do it.
Right. So they say, like back in verse 25, they said, why should we die? For this great fire will consume us. So they asked Moses to go near and hear all that the Most High said, and then bring it back to them because of their timidity in dealing with the Most High directly. So basically, what I was just saying before about the prior verses, this is just continuing on within the narrative. You can read 28 through 29.
And the Lord heard the voice, and the Lord heard your words when you spoke to me. And the Lord said to me, I have heard the words of this people, which they have spoken to you. They have rightly said all that they have spoken. Oh, that they had such a mind as this always, to fear me and to keep all my commandments, that it might go well with them and with their children forever.
Right. So the Most High, he acknowledges what the people said and then says that they spoke rightly, but he also said, if only they had a heart in them to fear me and keep all my commandments. And then it continues on, that it might go well with them, with their children forever.
Right.
And again, this goes back to something that was mentioned earlier on in the chapter and also in Deuteronomy 4 and 40, dealing with a prolonged life and things going well with us. It's just repeating the same formula that we see. If we obeyed, then we'd receive prolonged life. The same motif being shown, and it's going to be something that continues on throughout the rest of the book of Deuteronomy, even up until we read the chapter about the curses and the blessings, or the blessings and the curses. It's going to list all the good things that would have happened to us, and then all the bad things that would occur if we didn't obey. That's like, it's laying out the groundwork. And then, not to spoil it for anybody, but as soon as we come out of Deuteronomy and get into Joshua, and then Joshua, his era is mighty. You go to, I think, Judges chapter 1, all the way at the end, it says that they did evil in the sight of the Lord and worshiped other gods. It's like within the first 70 years.
So crazy.
Like, they, in this generation, they're very familiar with like what the Lord said about what's going to happen to you if you do well, but what's going to happen to you if you don't. They're very familiar, but like very early on, they apostatized and abandoned faith and went against what the Most High said to do, and they suffered for it. And that's why you see in the Book of Judges they're constantly getting, put into captivity, and then they got to cry out to the Most High, and then the Most High, because He's merciful, he relents a little bit on them, but then they back into it. Then it's just a constant cycle. But not to go on a tangent. But you got any points before we move on, King?
I just want to look at this. How they were so afraid to go out in the midst of the fire that the Most High was going to destroy them or something, right? And the Most High responds like, "Man, I just wish they had this same mindset." When it comes to keeping the commandments, because the understanding is if you're not obedient, you're going to end up destroyed. So just in the same way they were scared to go up there near the fire because they thought they would be destroyed, it's the same thing that they see in the laws, but they still don't have that mindset to continue keeping the laws of the Most High. And it's the same thing with our people today, that like if there's a tornado outside, you're not gonna go outside. You're gonna stay as far away from that tornado as possible because you're scared that you may be killed. And then the same thing with people being selective about the things that they don't do or won't do because God said don't do it. But if only that they had such a mind as this always, to fear me and to keep all my commandments, that it might go well with them and with their children forever. People don't have that mindset toward the Most High with everything that He said. Just selective things. But yeah, you can continue.
All praises to the Most High. Excellent point. Let's wrap it up, man. Verse 30 through 33.
Go and say to them, return to your tents, but you stand here by me, and I will tell you all the commandment and the statutes and the ordinance which you shall teach them, that they may do them in the land which I give them to possess. You shall be careful to do therefore as the Lord your God has commanded you. You shall not turn aside to the right hand or to the left. You shall walk in all the way which the Lord your God has commanded you, that you may live, and that it may go well with you, and that you may live long in the land which you shall possess.
All praise to the Most High. So right here we see the Most High tells the people to return to their tents, but Moses is told to stand and receive all the commandments, statutes, and judgments to teach Israel. Then it communicates how Moses closes out this portion of the rehearsal by telling them to observe and to do exactly what the Most High commanded, not turning aside to the right hand or to the left. So this is also a commandment, for them to not go aside from what the Most High told them to do, whether it's this way or that way, but you're supposed to remain on the straight path, and I think when you read in the book of, close it out with this right here. I don't know if it reads like this in this translation, but let me see. I think it's Psalm 119, verse number 1. It says, it reads a little bit different. I'll put it in the KJV, even though it gives the same understanding, but I like let me see something. Yeah, it gives the same idea, but I like how the KJV renders it right here. Psalm 119:1, it says, "Blessed are the undefiled in the way, who walk in the law of the Lord." And when you look here at the language here, it says the undefiled in the way, root word tamim, but right here the word derek, which is in reference to a path or a way that one walks. Right here it can say way, road, distance, journey, manner, habit. It says moral character as well. But we see that the law is likened unto a way that one walks or a way of life. So that's why you see verbiage like, don't turn to the left or to the right, but you're supposed to continue on a straight, as people say, the straight and narrow. And you even see language like that in Matthew chapter 7 with the Messiah. But all praises to the Most High. That's the conclusion to Deuteronomy chapter 5. Brother Hurd, you got anything you want to add on, King?
A beautiful lesson. And shalom, Sister Diamond, too. Shalom, sis. But that's it. I don't have anything I want to add. All praise to the Most High.
All praises. All praises. And we're gonna close it out with Numbers chapter 6 in verse 24 on down. Yahweh bless thee and keep thee. Yahweh make his face shine upon thee and be gracious unto thee. Yahweh lift up his countenance upon thee and give thee peace. And they shall put my name upon the children of Israel, and I will bless them. And with that, I'll say peace and shalom.
Shalom, Mark. Shalom, family.
Nobody told me that this road would be easy. So if somebody told you that, you don't believe them. Nobody told me that this road would be easy. So if somebody told you that, you don't believe them. Gotta be refined like silver. Through the fire. Gotta be tried like gold. Through the fire. Gotta be refined like silver. Through the fire. Gotta be tried like gold. Through the fire. You ain't fighting the flesh, it's cause you giving in. Should've never started the race if you ain't intend to win. Adversity can destroy you or be your best friend. Just cause you fail one time don't make you less than. You just gotta be aware and correct your error. Messiah on the way back, I feel it in the air. Trying to inherit the kingdom, wanna be your fellow heir. If you bring nothing to the table, can't pull up a chair. When I rebuke you, his love is just because I care. Plus when the separation happen, I don't want you to be a tear. You think you ain't gotta do nothing to get eternal life, but that misapplication of grace is a total lie. Gotta be refined like silver. Through the fire. Gotta be tried like gold. Through the fire. Gotta be refined like silver. Through the fire. Gotta be tried like gold. Through the fire.
Been through the fire like a circus lion. I ain't lying, you can ask a lion of Judah. Fire on me, but it ain't consume me. But burn the portion, hallelujah. Sing fame, gold and silver. Tried in the fire, not a pretty sight. That's how you get Israelites claiming that they no longer is the Israelites. It get hard sometimes, but growing up with me ain't good doing. I heard the devil is on the job, but I care more about what y'all doing. Shine your light here, influence. Big brotherhood, big brother the hood. If we separate from us all bad, then it's nothing left, but it's all good. I lost everything in my life. Matthew 16:25. If I can do it, you can too. It only take a mustard seed of faith to thrive. Hell nah, it ain't easy, but it's no other way. Y'all's way, y'all's the way, Yahweh. Hey.
Gotta be refined like silver. Through the fire. Gotta be tried like gold. Through the fire. Gotta be refined like silver. Through the fire. Gotta be tried like gold. Through the fire. Nobody told me that this road would be easy. So if somebody told you that, you don't believe them. Nobody told me that this road would be easy. So if somebody told you that, you don't believe